Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to the Health Show here only on the Islam channel with me, Alistair Greener. Tackling health problems every week, we're joined by a health expert within their specialised field who discusses the preventions of health issues or concerns that we or our loved ones may face. Looking at how you can change your health and lifestyle for the better, the Health Show offers an alternative viewpoint from our health experts who attend the show. And we really hope that this will help guide you in the right direction. So if you suffer from any medical issues or have any health concerns, or for that matter, if you know anybody who does, then do tune in each week as we'll be covering a wide range of topics and offering alternative viewpoints from our health experts. If you'd like any further information on our programmes or any of the topics that we discuss, then please do get in touch at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. That's healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Now, we know that kids love sugary things, but too much sugar can lead to serious diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes, which people are getting younger than ever before. The Change4Life programme has been created by Public Health England and creates ways of cutting back on sugar with lower sugar swaps on the things that we eat every day. That means that kids get less sugar but are still happy. To discuss the campaign, it's a great pleasure to welcome nutritionist Azmina Gavinji. Azmina bridges the communications gap between consumers and the food industry by translating scientific evidence into simple, practical language. She specialises in plant-based eating, diabetes and weight management. She's also an independent, award-winning nutritionist, as well as a registered dietitian, best-selling author and mother. Azmina, thank you so much indeed for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Lots to talk about on this really, really important campaign, so thanks for being here. Now, before we talk to Azmina more, let's take a look at the new Change4Life TV advert.
Just one little sugar cube. Surely this can't really hurt. But kids like me are having twice as much as we should. That's around 8 sugar cubes too many every day. That's 2,800 sugar cubes a year. Too much sugar can cause painful tooth decay, and every 10 minutes, a kid like me has a tooth removed in hospital. It can lead to harmful fat building up inside our bodies, and this can cause serious health problems, like type 2 diabetes, which we are getting younger than ever before, as well as heart disease and some cancers. You can help your kids cut back on sugar while still keeping us happy. Search Change4Life now for lots of sugar swap ideas.
Azmina, it was great to look at that, and it's a wonderfully visual and very captivating campaign. Tell us a little bit about what really meant with the campaign, what it is that got you all into it, and why Public Health England feel it's so important.
Well, we know that around a third of Black and Asian children are leaving primary school overweight or obese. So this is a big problem. And cutting down on our sugar intake can help to reduce those risks.
And looking at the advert, who's it actually aimed at? Because the language is great for kids and pretty well everybody.
You're right. It's very simple and it's aimed at everybody. It's aimed at the whole family. And it's just about thinking twice, being a little bit more aware. When you go to the supermarket or to the Asian food store, make a swap when you next shop. So think about, what am I picking up? And is there something else that I could choose that's slightly lower in sugar, but will still be a delicious food for my family?
OK, so let's look at the actual campaign, because there's been lots of campaigns about healthy eating before. What's different about this one?
So this is about really taking note that everyone in the family can make that difference. As parents, we're role models for our children, and if we can encourage healthy eating habits in childhood, hopefully that will translate to healthier future generations. But then there's also the grandparents, well-meaning grandparents, who might give sweet treats, but actually if we target them too, then they can help our children to make healthier choices.
Because one of the things that's quite interesting, we've known for a long time that we need to be healthier. We've known a long time about childhood obesity and things. What is it, do you think, about this campaign that's going to get through to people? Because education is incredibly important, but the best will in the world, sometimes the message doesn't always get through.
You're so right. And behaviour change is not easy. But I think if we think about a couple of things, firstly, the consequences of too much sugar. So the advert showed how people, young children are having teeth removed. Who likes going to the dentist? So that might be quite a motivator for young children, but also the longer term effects. If you have too much sugar, it can contribute to a build-up of fat on the inside. Also, it can contribute to you just having too many calories. And weight gain is associated with higher risks of conditions like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and within South Asian communities, we are already at an increased risk just genetically of these conditions. So we need to start taking note. So this campaign is about the simplicity of making those swaps while you're in the supermarket, or just looking at your portion size when you're eating these foods to help make the difference.
OK, let's look at exactly how it works, because one of the great things is it's talking people's language today. In other words, it comes in the form of an app. It's something that's interactive. It's incredibly easy to use. But just explain how it works. And for somebody who wants to get on board and says, OK, I'm buying into this, where do I get the app? How does the app work? What do I do?
OK, the app is called the Food Scanner app. You can download it on any smartphone or an iPad. Go to the supermarket and you basically just look at the barcode. It will scan the barcode of any product that's compatible with the app. It will tell you how many cubes of sugar are in that product, and you can scan a comparable, let's say a breakfast cereal. It might be your children's favourite sugary breakfast cereal. You might look at that and be quite surprised at the amount of sugar that is in a very sugary one. It could be about 3 cubes per bowl. Then compare that to a lower sugar, higher fibre breakfast cereal. Again, just scan the app, seconds, really easy, and choose the one that's lower in sugar.
And of course, this is something it's designed deliberately to be very child-oriented. So actually, this can be, because let's be honest, it's kids often who teach us adults how to use apps and how to use all these things. So they can actually get the phone and they can take part in the game as well, almost.
I think that's a really crucial point. Because if we can involve children in their own food intake, in their own health, then they're more likely to be bought in. And often, if we can get children to do the playing, take them to the supermarket, bring them into the kitchen, get them chopping vegetables, get them involved in food, then that will help them to enjoy it more. And yes, the app is just so easy. And there's another way that they can get involved, is to search Change4Life, look at Google, any other search engines, search for Change4Life, and lots of really simple swaps on there.
Now, the focus is really all about sugar cubes, and that becomes quite relatable. How many sugar cubes? So how many sugar cubes should a child be having a day for a normal, healthy, growing youngster?
OK, so ideally, the less sugar you have, the better. But if you do want to have sugar, children of about 4 to 6 years old should be having no more than 5 sugar cubes or 5 teaspoons of free sugars a day. And that can be quite confusing. Some people, what's a free sugar, what's a natural sugar, but maybe we can go into that.
Yeah.
But basically 5 sugar cubes. And an older child, let's say 7 to 10, should be having about 6 sugar cubes. But what's interesting is that Change4Life looked at how much sugar are our children actually eating. And what they found was that a 10-year-old child is having the amount of sugar that they ought to have had as a maximum if they were 18 years old. So what we tend to do is cram all that sugar into a very young child, and each of our children are having about 8 more sugar cubes than they should be each day.
And we'll talk about the health benefits in a while and why it makes such a dramatic difference to someone's health. But just in terms of understanding it, because we've seen the traffic light system, and it's got how many grams of this and how many grams of that, and it's red if it's too many and so on, which obviously is a really important initiative, but I presume this one's designed just to be even simpler. Even
simpler, very, very, very easy. And, some people find it hard to look at all the different parameters. I've got to look at fat, I've got to look at salt, saturates, etc. Maybe we can just focus on the sugar. Maybe this is, behaviour change isn't that easy, but if we take it in small steps, we can make that difference. So perhaps one avenue is to focus on the sugar, download the Food Scanner app, play with it, look at different products. For example, a cola might have about 9 cubes of sugar, whereas if you go for a diet cola, you could have 0. So get children involved and make those simple swaps.
Now, that's an interesting thing, actually. What's your view on these sweeteners, on these sugar substitutes? Because there's a lot of discussion about whether they're good or not good or whatever. What's your view on that? So going from, as you say, the regular full sugar version down to the diet version.
So food manufacturers who choose to add a sugar substitute are doing everything by the law. These sugar substitutes have been vigorously tested so that they are safe. So when you see it on a packet, don't worry about it. Obviously, if you're over-consuming, then that's a different story. I think it's a matter of personal choice. If you're someone who says, do you know what, I want to go down the natural route and I'd rather go for lower sugar products or a lower portion size, that's great. Or if you're someone who says, you know, I've got a really sweet tooth and I love my cola, or if you have diabetes, for example, where actually having too much sugar is going to give you very sharp rises in your blood glucose, especially in a liquid form, then a diet version of that drink can be really helpful.
And absolutely, this is all about cutting down on those sugars, and the immediate health effects on that are really obvious, as we're going to talk about in just a moment. Coming back to the campaign itself, what are you doing to get that campaign out there, to get people engaged with it, to make sure that people realise, A, how simple it is? I mean, I've used the app myself, and actually you talked about the other health elements. You can very easily on the bottom go to the menu and see the other aspects. So if you are worried about salt, or you're worried about, you know, the amount of fibre and things like that, you can see all of those things in there. But obviously the focus is on sugar. So how are you getting that message out there to make sure that people really engage with this particular initiative?
Well, the Islam channel is a perfect opportunity because when you think about South Asian communities, they are more at risk of these conditions that we're worried about, and we tend to be more overweight. And the other interesting thing is that parents tend to focus more on educational attainment than things like, say, physical activity. So when we look at our child's health, first comes education, then maybe something like Quran classes, and then what am I doing about their diet? So we need to, as a family, think about, let's bring that up a notch. And if we are healthier, we're going to actually be performing better during exams, during school, etc.
Let's look at actually child health. You know, we talked about, you know, children being overweight, sometimes being obese. And it's so often down to those two things, isn't it? It's activity and the amount of sugar intake. What's wrong with a child being overweight?
So if you are more overweight, you are more at risk of what we call non-communicable diseases. And these are conditions like coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, type 2 diabetes. So actually watching your weight as a child will help you to watch your weight as an adult, because hopefully you will have better, healthier lifestyle habits. And South Asian men, for example, ought to be looking at their waist measurement and trying to get below 36 inches, because as you get higher than that, then you are increasing your risks of these non-communicable diseases like type 2 diabetes.
So how does it work with children? The fact is, you know, you talked there about habits, which makes perfect sense. You get into really good habits. But what about the actual physical damage that you could be doing to your health, or you could be doing to your child's health by allowing them to be overweight? Because those sort of problems aren't necessarily going to manifest themselves straight away, are they?
Yeah, and that's the difficulty, is motivating children when this is something that's going to happen a lot later in life. But you're so right that we are storing up problems for later life. And unfortunately, what we are finding within South Asian communities is that the condition type 2 diabetes is happening even younger. So it used to be a condition that you got, you know, 40s, 45 years old, if you were overweight and had a family history of diabetes. But now what we're finding is type 2 diabetes is being diagnosed much earlier. And one of the reasons for that is overweight children and unhealthy lifestyle habits.
And type 2 diabetes, again, just to recap, that is predominantly completely avoidable.
Absolutely. You can reduce your risks of type 2 diabetes by eating a healthy diet, lots of fibre, less saturated fat, less sugar, being physically active. And this reduction in risk can help to reduce your risks in later life. And yeah, potentially prevent type 2 diabetes, even if you have a family history.
I noticed the very first thing that was in the advert, and you've mentioned it as well, is the whole issue of dentistry and tooth decay, a massive issue. And what a great motivator for children, that actually too much sugar can damage your teeth. How does it damage your teeth?
So when you have sugar in your teeth, bacteria love sugar, and they will feed on that sugar, and they will start to erode the enamel, which is your protective coating around your tooth. And that can lead to holes in your teeth. It can lead to decay, and that sends you to the doctor, to the dentist, where you may need a filling and sometimes a tooth extraction. So children, and neither do adults in my experience, like going to the dentist or like getting fillings or their teeth extracted. So actually there is a direct link between sugar intake and tooth decay. And especially if you look at drinks where you might be sipping throughout the day, that's going to cause even more damage because that drink is around your mouth for longer periods of time.
Some people might say, well, yeah, you know what, we have our baby teeth, we lose them anyway, so it doesn't really matter if we damage them, does it?
Well, again, it's about habits, isn't it? And, you know, under 3 years old, we shouldn't be giving our children any sugar at all. So that's the first thing, and that's when they have these milk baby teeth. But as they grow, you want to be developing that palate for other, more delicious foods and having less need for sugary sweets and sugar tastes.
Now, the whole campaign is about swaps. It's about swapping something that's high in sugar with something that's low in sugar. How does that work? Right.
So again, the simple swaps on the Change4Life website will give you some tips. But if you take the food scanner app, you can look at, for example, a sugar-rich drink, a juice drink, and compare it to one that's not so sugar-rich. If you think about yogurts, for example, I think yogurt is a great food, great source of protein, calcium, iodine. But some of them, you know, the ones that you call split pots, where you have a sugary base and then you have this sugary compote, they can be quite high in sugar. So looking at your food scanner app and thinking, right, maybe I can change that to a plain yogurt, add some chopped bananas, some berries to my plain yogurt. That's a much healthier way to get that sweet taste, but actually cutting down on your sugar.
Now that brings us to very neatly onto the topic of refined sugars versus natural sugars. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so sugar is naturally present in fruit, for example. And if you were to eat some strawberries or an apple, you will get sugar. But because that sugar is intrinsically part of the cells of the apple or the cells of the berries, you're not going to absorb it or digest it quite as quickly as if that sugar was squashed up into a juice when it goes into your bloodstream much more quickly and causes your blood sugar to go up and can attack your teeth more.
We talked earlier on about the South Asian community in particular. Now, you said that actually they're more at risk. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. We are genetically more predisposed to conditions like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And we tend to have a higher family history of these conditions. So there's nothing you can do about the genetics. There's nothing you can do about what's happened in the past, your family history. And in fact, South Asian men are more at risk, so there's nothing you can do about your gender. But what we can do something about is our lifestyle habits and the foods we choose to eat. And so when we think of festivities, which is very common within our communities, Eid and all sorts of beautiful festivities where a birth of a child, new job, we tend to get out the sweetmeats and the sugary foods. Maybe that's a time also where we can think about, are there more natural foods that I could use as a celebratory food?
And coming to these particular foods, again, is it this particular community that tends to eat more of those foods than maybe other ethnic groups?
Well, we're a very, very hospitable community. I know my mum's always got, sweetmeats and chevra and jalebi and ganti and all these wonderful, delicious foods at home, just in case some guests come, and we've got to be hospitable. But actually, maybe we need to not stock those foods, because if they're at home, they're accessible to the family and we're more likely to choose them. So perhaps we need to think about, what are the sorts of foods that I can stock up on? The dried fruit, fresh fruit, delicious cut-up vegetables, all sorts of interesting foods that you can have accessible, that are filling, that are higher in fibre and lower in sugar.
Now, you see this as a very much a whole family issue, for everyone to get involved. And one of the things you highlight are grandparents. What is it about grandparents that can make such a big difference?
Well, many grandparents will live within, let's say, an extended family household, and they can have a great influence on what the grandchildren are eating because parents may be out at work. So I see them as a great role model, and the Change for Life campaign is looking at how can we influence these well-meaning grandparents to perhaps choose healthier foods. So we talked about the very sugary yogurts, for example, the ones with the split pots. Instead of that, we always have natural yogurt at home. Great food, part of our natural, traditional cuisine. So perhaps choosing to have a lassi, let's say, with some banana or mango is a great way to give a sugary, sweet taste without having so much high sugar foods. And these grandparents are well-meaning. This is a way we show love to our children and grandchildren. But perhaps they can show that love and demonstrate it by giving them healthier choices.
Now, I know as a nutritionist, you're probably very keen on home cooking and freshly prepared food. There's a lot of research to say that some of the more, if you like, the pre-prepared meals that people might have because it's quick, it's easy, they actually are quite shocking, the amount of sugar and salt and additives that they have in them.
Yes, many pre-prepared ready meals will be higher in, say, saturated fat, salt or sugar. And that's where I think the Food Scanner app really helps us to make those comparisons. And when we're busy, we do opt for something that we can put into the microwave. But there are healthier foods that you can do that with. You know, a jacket potato, some baked beans, some coleslaw, really good foods, or some pasta and some tomatoes and some good cheese can be really healthy foods. So perhaps we need to be thinking about the Western foods that we're eating when we're rushing around, these convenience foods that you talk about, as well as the home-cooked foods. Think about what simple, small changes can we make that make a difference to the whole family, because we are the role models for our children. And there's no point in giving the children healthy foods when we're having all the unhealthy foods. So we've all got to play our part, and that will reduce the risks of these diseases for all of us.
And just before we go to break, again, just give us a quick recap on the app, how it works and who should be getting involved.
Okay, so everyone should be getting involved because it is so simple, and this is about future generations and the health of our families. So search Change for Life on the internet. You can look at all the sugar swaps on there. When you go to the supermarket, make a swap when you next shop, and how you make that swap is either look at the label for yourself and compare different brands, or download the Food Scanner app. Really quick and easy, seconds, and you can actually use the barcode to scan different products and choose the lower sugar one.
And involve the children in the process, because the chances are they'll love playing with the app.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the moment. Lots more to talk about in the second half. Now, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. We'll see you right after the break. Welcome back to the Health Show, where we're looking at the Change for Life campaign. And discussing this topic, we're delighted to be joined again by Azmina Govinji, an award-winning registered dietitian. Now, did you know that just 1 or 2 everyday swaps can really make a difference to how much sugar your child is having, while still keeping them happy? Children in England are eating an extra 2,800 sugar cubes a year, which is more than double the recommended guidelines. That's 8 cubes too many each day. Half of the sugar in our children's diet comes from sugary sweets, drinks, biscuits, cakes, puddings, sugary breakfast cereals and higher sugar yogurts and puddings. But it's actually easy to cut back by swapping from higher to lower sugar products. Let's take a look at another Change for Life new TV advert.
We love sugary things, but too much sugar can lead to serious diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Now Mum's got an easy way to cut back on sugar with lower sugar swaps on the things we eat every day. So we get less sugar and we're still happy.
Just 1 or 2 swaps can really make a difference. So make a swap when you next shop.
The whole message there is, again, about swapping. Now, we've talked in the first half about the Change for Life campaign, about cutting down on sugar. And this is really about making a swap. When you go particularly to the supermarket, isn't it? Again, just remind us what it is that we're actually doing when we go to the supermarket to make this swap.
So when you go into the supermarket, check labels. Look at the back of the pack. Now, some people find label reading a little bit difficult, so what Change4Life have done is they've produced the food scanner app, which is really easy to download, and it will take you seconds. You just scan the barcode, and it will tell you how many cubes of sugar are in that product, so you can scan another comparable type of product and choose the one that's lowest in sugar.
And of course, often you can actually give something, if it looks the same, the chances are they won't even notice.
Yeah, I think that's very true. But for me, it's about also engaging the children in their own health and actually saying, look, if we did this, this is going to mean fewer trips to the dentist, for example. I don't think we should use food as a reward, but it might be things like that that we can help and encourage children to do. And if we're doing the same thing as role models, as parents and as grandparents, then that can help children to also come on board.
Now, this is a huge campaign. Public Health England have invested massively in it. Why is it so important, and why is it so much of a particular problem right now?
OK, so the rates of childhood obesity are staggering. Around a third of our children are leaving primary school either overweight or obese. This is shocking. And actually, if they are overweight or obese, they are more likely to get some cancers, type 2 diabetes and coronary heart disease. And often these conditions are prevalent more so in South Asian communities.
Maybe give us an idea of some children that you've seen who actually shouldn't be in the condition they are in because it's so avoidable.
It is so avoidable. I think that some of the difficulties arise from cultural reasons. So within, say, South Asian families, a slightly chubbier child is considered to be healthier. And when they start to lose weight, the sort of comments I hear from families is, oh, is that child not well? Are you not feeding them properly? So I think there is a cultural piece to this. And perhaps programs like this help to increase the awareness that we need to be thinking about healthier body shapes. If you look at Bollywood, we're going down that route. Used to be the cultural ideal, used to be very chubby, curvy women. And now slimmer women are on our screens. So maybe we need to be thinking about cultural ideals. And it is okay to be slimmer because you could be healthier as long as you don't go too much to the other extreme.
Well, exactly. But again, this is all about maintaining health. What are the kind of conversations that you would recommend parents and grandparents to have with their children? How do you broach the subject? Because as we talked about in the first half, for children, it's way down the line that they can potentially have the consequences of their bad eating habits today. So how do you broach that conversation, and what is the type of conversation that you would recommend parents and grandparents have?
So I think what's interesting is the choice of words you had, the parents and grandparents. I think that's where the conversation needs to start, so that the elders in the family are working together to help the family to eat better. And once they've established what they want to do, such as use the food scanner app or cut down on portion sizes of sugary foods, then it is about how do we engage the children. And I don't think it's about having the conversation necessarily. It's just about doing. It's about involving them in the supermarket, in the kitchen. It's about eating with them and choosing and having accessible, healthier options so that that's what they're used to. That's what they take to lunch at school. When their friends come home, that's what's served.
And it's quite interesting when you start using the app, you suddenly realise how much sugar is in things. And it's in things that you don't expect, like bread and things which actually might have quite a savoury flavour, but have actually got a lot of sugar in them, haven't they?
Yes, sugar is often added to savoury foods, and there may be technical reasons for that. The biggest sugar contributors are confectionery, Indian sweetmeats, sugary drinks, which might be considered a good source of energy, and we all need them. But actually, we don't need them. We get energy from all our foods. So the big contributors are the sugary drinks, sweets and chocolates, cakes and biscuits, and then the higher sugar things like breakfast cereals, high sugar drinks, and very, very sugary yogurts.
What evidence is there that shows that developing good habits when children are young, even from birth, let's say, when you're first putting a baby onto solid foods, that you actually start almost training their bodies to have lower sugar, healthier food? What evidence is there that that actually makes a massive difference all the way through their lives?
Well, what's against us, unfortunately, is that breast milk is sugary. So we are born with an innate need and a desire for sweetness. So it's an uphill battle from a very young age, but it's those habits that we establish in childhood that are more likely to stay with us in adulthood. So, for example, if you're exposing your children to very salty foods, you develop that taste for salt. And it's very hard then not to enjoy those fast foods as they grow up. So perhaps look at all the parameters and have milder, less salt, less sugar, expose them to higher fibre foods, lots of fresh fruit and vegetables. The Asian cuisine is filled with great foods. Dal, roti, brown basmati rice. We've got access to amazing food. So let's give them the natural flavours of food rather than sprinkling salt and sugar onto foods.
And it's interesting to talk about sprinkling salt and pepper on foods and things, and about getting into these habits, because I know one of the things that you advocate is little by little, isn't it? It's like, don't go from this extreme to that extreme, yes. But ease it gently. What sort of advice is there available to people to help them in that process, to give them an idea of a kind of trajectory, if you like, of improvement that they can make?
I think that's really important because the internet is filled with advice. And where do you get that credible advice? People are looking at Instagram and social media for their health advice. So think about where you're getting your advice from. If someone's got a load of followers on social media, but they're not an expert, think twice. You wouldn't go to your dentist to get your appendix taken out, would you? So think about getting your advice from qualified, registered dietitians, registered nutritionists, NHS Digital, Public Health England, CHANGE4LIFE, British Heart Foundation, British Dietetic Association. There are so many credible sources of information, and much of it very practical. And
of course, a lot of this information will be available when you take your children for doctors to checkups and things like that, that actually your doctor, your GP is a perfect source of information, and also somebody who can then point you in the right direction. I think pointing in the right direction is the key, because the GP can point you towards accessible, good, expert nutrition advice. It's the dietitians and the registered nutritionists that can give you that expertise. So when you're looking at sources on Twitter, Instagram, etc., check behind the small print. And if they say they're a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, you can trust that their advice is based on evidence rather than something else. What are some of the misconceptions that people have about sugar, about maybe the campaign, maybe about their child's weight maybe not being such an issue? What are the sort of the challenges that you have as a dietitian, as a nutritionist, and the campaign has to really make sure you overcome these preconceptions that people have? I think people think, I'm okay today, why should I worry? I think that's probably one of the biggest things, and targeting young people is very hard because they don't have any evidence that there's anything wrong with the unhealthy choices that they're making. So we do need to think about how can we encourage them to think about their future life or these trips to the dentist. And that's why I think that within communities like Black and South Asian communities, where the family is such an important, close-knit product, that's where we need to get the whole family involved, because we are all exposed to raised blood cholesterol and raised risks of heart disease, high blood pressure, strokes. Very, very prevalent within our families. So if we can start to think about the consequences of these unhealthy habits, then I think we can make that difference. Now, the Change4Life app is a major part of the campaign, so that when people go to supermarkets, they can use their smartphone, they can get that instantaneous information, they can then make the swap. But there's a massive backup on the website as well. Tell us the sort of information that people can get from that, because it goes hand in hand with the app, but also it's good, reliable information from Public Health England. It's certainly reliable, because everything on the Change4Life website will be based on evidence and good data. Take an example of a recipe. That's been calculated so that we know that it's going to give you a good level of nutrients for a start. This isn't just about sugar. You'll get fibre, you'll get vitamins and minerals, but also the portion size will be right for an average person. And I think sometimes if we didn't want to worry about sugar and fat and fibre, it's a lot to think about. Maybe just think about your portion sizes. We tend to have bigger plates, and within the way that we eat, there'll be biryani and all these delicious foods in the centre of the table.
And we tend to go for second helpings, maybe third helpings. Maybe grandmother's putting some on your plate for you. I was brought up like that. And it's very hard to say no. So perhaps we need to think about these habits. Perhaps look at your plate. I've done some great videos on what your plate should look like. And think about, how do you balance that plate? How do you get the right portion size, which is really practical and simple?
And that's really what it's about, isn't it? Because if it's doable, if this is something that is achievable, you're going to get a far greater level of engagement, aren't you?
It has, you're right, it has to be achievable, it has to be practical, it has to be simple, and also you need to enjoy your food. This is not about dieting, it's not about deprivation. As soon as you say deprivation to someone, they want to even more. So this isn't about that. It's about enjoying food. It's about really having this community effort. I did some work for the British Heart Foundation where we went into mandirs and mosques and gurdwaras, and we looked at the cooking habits within those places, and we gave talks to the congregations, etc. And this is about, as a community, thinking about how can we make these simple changes but still enjoy our traditional cuisine as well as a good mix of Western foods.
Now, that's a really good point. You know, the fact that you're going into the communities and you're talking about the foods that they eat, you know, irrespective of what they may be eating culturally that isn't particularly good. Give us a bit of an idea of some of the success stories that you've had where you've been able to actually just move people a little bit away from the sugar and the salt and the unhealthy things to something that actually tasted just as good but was a lot healthier.
Well, we were, on behalf of the Food Standards Agency and the British Heart Foundation, I was lucky enough to lead a team of dietitians across the UK where we actually went into the kitchens of these places of worship. And we measured how much salt, how much fat, how much sugar is being added to these foods that are being served to the congregation. And we instructed very carefully, with lots of rapport and engagement, the volunteers within the kitchens as to how to make small, simple changes, for example, to the salt. So, you know, in Asian cuisine, we don't measure, we take a teaspoon of this, a handful of this, etc. So we looked at, okay, let's take the spoon. If you take a tablespoon of salt, you're going to put it into that curry. When you take that tablespoon, shake the spoon. Simple idea, just shake it. And some of the salt granules will go down, and then cook your curry. And that's a really easy way to get reduction. The success story is we reduced salt by 14%, and not in a very long time. So when I work with families, I tend to say, how about we start measuring? We don't tend to. And the Change for Life recipes are about measuring. But if we think about the way that we cook, instead of that oil, which I know my mum taught me, just pour the oil into the pan and then you fry your onions and spices. Delicious. Think about measuring the oil with a tablespoon. See what you're using today. It might be 4 tablespoons, it might be 8 tablespoons. At least you have a benchmark. And then look at your recipes and gradually cut down the number of tablespoons you're using so that over time, you're making healthier food and the family might not even notice.
Well, that's the big thing, isn't it? If you can do it just bit by bit and gradually change people's taste buds. I mean, how long does it take for someone's taste buds to change significantly from being used to, you know, a very high intake of sugar and salt and other things to actually change for the better? How long does it take someone to go through that sort of change and that process to better way of living?
Well, obviously everyone is different and there is individual variation. Some studies will quote 21 days or a few weeks or whatever. I think the main thing is to do it gradually. And the people that I have weaned off sugary tea, for example, you know, once they stop taking sugar, you give them sugary tea and they'll be like, oh God, that makes me feel sick. I just can't tolerate it anymore. So there are ways that you can retrain your palate so that you can be enjoying low sugar, low salt foods. And thinking of sugary tea, that's another one that we need to be careful about within our communities, because chai, which is delicious, but it's boiled with lots of full-fat milk, sugar in a pot, and everybody gets the same thing. Maybe we need to be thinking about not adding the sugar to the pot and actually having sugar-free tea. Even if you added a little on your own, I think you'd probably be getting less than that chai that you'd be making for everybody else.
And as you say, if you just gradually reduce it bit by bit, the chances are people won't notice it. And does the same apply for children?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if we do it gradually, like I said with that sugary breakfast cereal, you know, changing from a high sugar breakfast cereal to a low one, I would rather children eat breakfast cereal. I think that they're a great source of nutrients. So I would rather they eat that cereal. They're also getting milk, great source of calcium and protein. But find ways to gradually cut down the portion size of the sugary cereal, or as I said, mix in a lower sugar cereal with that, or sweeten a cereal with berries and bananas and all sorts of delicious fruits that you can have to give you that natural sweet taste.
And that's a big thing, isn't it? About, you know, we talked in the first half about taking away the refined sugars and adding the more natural sugars. Maybe give us a few more examples. You talked about the yoghurt, for example, using plain yoghurt and natural fruit rather than maybe some of these pre-prepared high sugar ones. What other kind of changes that can people make where the flavour isn't necessarily that much different, but because you've prepared it yourself, A, you know how much sugar's gone into it, and B, you know it's going to be significantly less than a pre-prepared version?
I think the main thing is to look at natural foods. So you know a berry, a strawberry, a banana, an apple. These are natural foods. Think about how you can sweeten foods with these natural foods. Raisins, dried apricots, dates, figs. Some of them are very, very sweet. But, you know, having a heaped tablespoon of raisins instead of 3 teaspoons of sugar is a much better way to get your sweetness.
And what about sugar alternatives? We talked in the first half a little bit about the sweetness, but there are alternatives, things like honey, for example. What's your view on that?
So honey is one of those free sugars which Public Health England has suggested we cut down on, because honey in your body acts in a very similar way to sugar in, say, a cola. So honey may not be the best sweetener, and it might be better to go down your dried fruit or your fresh fruit route.
Well, that's great advice, because some people might just think, oh, I'll put honey in instead. That's not as bad as sugar. So it's good to do that, what I would call a little bit of myth busting, if you like. You know, some of the things that people think, oh, that's okay. Are there any others out there that people think, yeah, that's fine?
It's a really good question, because on labels, manufacturers might put things like molasses, golden syrup, treacle, and we think, oh, that's not sugar. You know, it doesn't say sugar on the label, but all of these are sources of what you called refined sugars or free sugars, and they will do you just as much harm. They have just as many calories as ordinary white table sugar. They will do just as much damage to your teeth and your future risks of these conditions.
Really good advice there as well. And again, as you said, if you prepare food yourself, you know exactly what's actually in there. Just a quick wrap up then. Final word of advice, and especially for people who maybe have watched this programme and said, yeah, but it's not really a problem for us. What would you say to them?
I think it's a problem for all of us, but I maybe wouldn't call it a problem. I'd call it an opportunity.
I love the positive spin there. That's
Oh,
great.
absolutely. We've got to be positive if we're going to make some changes. So this is about having a better quality of life for you, your family, and future generations. Because if we implement these changes with our children, we are influencing generations to come because of healthier lifestyle habits.
And finally, for more information, go where?
Search Change for Life. You'll get lots of tips. Download the Food Scanner app.
And Change for Life is the number 4. Change4Life.
Yes, yes.
Good thing to know. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
It's been
you.
great finding out more, and hopefully we're going to help people get a little bit healthier. Now, unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but I'd like to thank our guest, Asmina Govinji, who's a nutritionist, for coming on the show and talking so much about Change for Life and what a difference it can make to you. Now, once again, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. If you'd like to find out more about this or any of the subjects that we've been discussing on the show, please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Again, that's healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Join us again next week, but for now, goodbye. Assalamu alaikum.